This is Peter's story, from health scare to empowerment and self-trust. A few years ago, Peter went through a really challenging experience. He discovered that one of the veins near his heart was almost completely closed. And honestly, he was angry, because in his mind, none of it made sense. He'd spent years focused on health, fitness, nutrition, discipline. So his reaction was, I am so healthy. How can this happen to me? Now, when something happens in the body, one of the first things I look at is, what's the body trying to communicate? Not because the body is wrong, but because the body is always in conversation with us. Blood represents life force, power, fuel, and veins are the channels that allow that life force to flow. So when there's constriction somewhere in the body, I often become curious about where someone may also be emotionally constricting themselves in life. Where do they not feel safe? Where are they holding back? Where are they protecting themselves? In this case, what was arising was Peter revealing to himself where he had tightened his grip on the flow of his power that was not shouting to be released. And what I explained to Peter was this. Sometimes symptoms don't appear because the body suddenly wants attention. They appear because you're finally ready to see what's already been there. It's almost like the body says, okay, boss, you want to expand now? You want more flow, more life, more truth. But before we go further, I need to show you what you've told me to protect. Because the nervous system is always trying to keep us safe. If somewhere inside us we've decided, this feeling is dangerous, this situation isn't safe, I can't trust, then the body will defend that belief like our survival depends on it. So the real question becomes, can the nervous system receive evidence that it's safe to let go now? And for Peter, 3 big revelations surfaced through this whole experience. The first one was fear of death. When I asked him to really sit with the possibility, not avoid it, not fight it, just calm his breathing down and just surrender to the feeling for a moment, something deeper surfaced underneath it. What he was actually afraid of was not providing. That was the deeper pain. Not death itself, but the fear of failing the people he loved. Then came the needle revelation. Before the operation, Peter had to go for a series of blood tests. And honestly, this became more revealing than the operation itself. The nurse was trying to take blood, and every time she came near him with the needle, he'd pull away like a frightened child. At first she found it funny. Then it became frustrating because he physically couldn't relax enough to let it happen. And as I watched him talk about it, I noticed something fascinating. Every time he described the needle, he pulled his wrist back and guarded it tightly with his other hand, almost like he was protecting himself from someone taking something from him. So I asked him, what are you actually feeling in that moment? And immediately he said, I don't like people taking things from me. And there it was. Not just fear of needles, fear of loss, fear of being drained, fear of being taken from. And once he saw it, he realized this pattern existed everywhere in his life, even in business. He wanted to be generous, but he constantly held himself back. Now we were talking about it, he was aware of how many times he used the phrase, I don't like people stealing my time. Part of him believed, if I give too much, people will rip me off. There won't be enough left. I'll lose. And suddenly the body made sense. His vein was constricting in exactly the same way he was constricting emotionally, holding back, protecting, restricting flow. What became even more interesting was the language he kept using. He repeatedly called it my heart problem. Now technically it wasn't a heart problem, it was a constricted vein, but subconsciously his language was revealing something deeper. Because underneath it all, this really was about the heart, about self-love, self-protection, trust, receiving, generosity. The way he was withholding from life was also the way he was withholding from himself. Then came the third revelation, the mirror of mistrust. He became incredibly resistant to having to get involved with the medical profession. He kept saying, they don't know what they're doing. I don't trust them. But again, the outer world was mirroring something deeper. Because underneath that resistance was his own mistrust of himself. Fear that he couldn't trust his own decisions. Fear of being misled. Fear that somewhere he had ignored himself, lied to himself, missed something. And this is something really important to understand. Just because we become aware of a pattern doesn't mean it instantly heals. Life will often keep presenting the same emotional theme in different forms, louder and louder, until we finally recognize what's asking to be healed. Not because life is punishing us, but because consciousness and truth and magnificence of who we truly are and how much power we really do have access to is trying to wake us up. And what mattered most for Peter wasn't becoming perfect. It was learning how to meet what he felt without fighting it. To acknowledge, yes, I feel mistrust. Yes, I feel fear. Yes, I feel like people might take from me. And then breathe and remind his nervous system, but I am safe. Those words became incredibly powerful for him. I am safe. Not, I must never feel fear again. Not, I have to force myself to trust. Just, I am safe now. Like telling an elite defense team, you can stand down. This is no longer a threat. And what's beautiful is that when Peter finally went in for the operation, he was blown away by the care, love and expertise he experienced. A final revelation was when the surgeon showed him his mirror. In fact, something happened during the surgery that made us laugh afterwards because it was such a precise mirror. Near the end of the procedure, the surgeon suddenly, unexpectedly, loudly shrieked, "Wow, Peter, look at that. I really outdid myself there. Wow, I did a great job." Now imagine hearing that while lying awake on an operating table. But the funny part was this, that behaviour was so Peter. He's always been someone who pats himself on the back when he's done something well. He doesn't wait for validation. And here was this surgeon, mirroring him perfectly. That's how precise life communicates. Here was this seemingly fearful situation saying, "Peter, you're safe to trust yourself. Look at how well you do things if you let go of the fear and mistrust of yourself." The final integration was Peter understanding that the real healing wasn't just physical. It was learning to live with more flow. To notice where he constricted himself, where he tightened, where rigid rules and protective behaviours were still controlling him, especially around giving, trust, business, health and control. And instead of fighting those emotions, he learned to acknowledge them, breathe, relax his nervous system, and remind himself, even though I feel this, I fully accept myself and I know that I am safe.